Hi guys, welcome to episode 21 of Tiger Heart Chats. I cannot believe we've got to 21. This is amazing. Like when I started this podcast, I just kind of did it for fun and we're getting lots of really positive responses. And I'm really happy that lots of people that are listening are getting value from them. Today, I've got an amazing guest. She is a clinical psychologist and consultant on mental health and well-being. Please welcome to the stage, Dr. Vikki Barnes.
Thank you, Sanj.
I'm so happy that we've got another mental health and wellbeing practitioner on here because the last few that we've done, we've got a lot of really positive responses and a lot of people are saying they're getting a lot from these types of podcasts. So I'm really happy to have someone else come to me, and I've done some research in you and I cannot wait to start talking to you. So there's lots of people that are listening to this that don't know much about you. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Sanj. Okay, let me give this a go. So I am a clinical psychologist, as you say, and I guess my specialism is the science of positive psychology. So I call myself a bit of a happiness expert, but that's just a title that I've given to myself, really, because it really kind of focuses on what I do more than the clinical psychology aspect of my role many years ago, which I'm sure you'll get me talking about at some point. But what I do now is, I do lots of work with organisations who want to better the mental well-being of their workforce. So look after their best asset, basically their people.
Wow.
But where I've come from is, I have worked for some time in the NHS with different companies as well, in both clinical and strategic roles. So lots of stuff that you'd expect a clinical psychologist to do, really. So assessment of mental health, intervention, doing one-to-one therapy. And then I came across this positive psychology, the science of positive psychology, and I just loved it. So I tried to get that into the ethos of everything that I did. And eventually it snowballed and lots of people became interested. And I ended up designing and leading a national wellbeing program for quite a big organisation, training a team of wellbeing experts with me to ensure that there was long-lasting impact within the workforce so that we could help the people that we worked with. So it's been a bit of a learning curve from my very clinical days working with a caseload, one-to-one, face-to-face, therapeutic work with clients to now working with globally lots of organisations who want to just have an ethos of positive well-being in their workplace and look after their people, which I think is the most important thing.
Absolutely. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, your job title, happiness expert. I mean, that's incredible. That's like one of the coolest titles I've ever heard in my life.
Well, like I said, I gave that to myself. So, you can think.
If there's ever going to be a happiness expert, someone has to kind of create that, and you've created that, and that's brilliant. That's awesome. So give us an overview into your perspective on positive psychology.
Well, positive psychology is the science of happiness in a nutshell, but it's actually not all about those emotions that we want to have all the time, like happiness, joy, excitement, love, wonderment, awe. All of those lovely emotions are what we want more of, but it's not ignoring the other emotions that we experience as well, which can be more difficult, like sadness, rage, anger, shame, guilt, fear, all of those things. What it does, positive psychology brings all of those emotions into play and says these are all human emotions. Or this is how I see positive psychology anyway, and how I work with it. Yeah. All of our emotions together form the wonderful human beings that we are. So we're accepting of all of this. But what we want to do is when things get a little bit tough, and life does get tough, nobody's immune to that. We want to be able to bring about those positive emotions more easily and more readily. And because of something called negativity bias, which is what humans, we all live with this, it's innate, it's natural. Yep. And it's automatic. Because of that, we need to work a little bit harder on the positive sometimes because it doesn't come as naturally to us. So positive psychology is about being your best. It's about being proactive and bringing in as much of those wonderful parts of our lives that we want to be our absolutely best selves as often as we can be, no matter what else is going on for us.
I started mentoring CEOs at the beginning of this year. And one of the things I've noticed is this thing that you touched on, negative bias. And I came up with this term to them: lay all of your cards on the table, but just focus on the positive ones as opposed to highlighting the negative ones, particularly when they're presenting or they're pitching. You touched on negative bias, and I'm sure there's people who are listening who don't understand that terminology. Can you give us a brief overview of what that is?
Yeah, of course. And all it is negativity bias is that we've got this little part of the inner workings of our brains called the amygdala, and it's constantly on the lookout for threats in our environment in order to keep us safe. So if something were to happen, like somebody were to approach us in a dark alleyway or an animal were to jump up to attack, that amygdala is ready to kick in with what we know as the fight, flight or freeze response. So negativity bias is just that because of survival, we're constantly looking out for things that are going wrong because that's good for us, it's adaptive, but we don't need it to be on high alert all of the time. And what we do need to do is bring in that kind of lovely, safe, happy, those lovely chemicals as well, alongside that, just to make sure that it's not taking over us.
Amazing. So just with regards to being a happiness expert, you're trying to help people manage that negative bias within their mindset. Is that right?
Well, the way I see it is that I'm trying to get people to focus on the positives and how they want their life to be. Yep. And then a side effect of that, I guess, is that negativity quietens down a little bit. So I don't tend to like focusing on the negatives, which is why I love positive psychology so much. And it's quite different to a lot of other psychological models. So rather than delving into and focusing on the negative, by focusing on the positive and where we want our lives to go, the negatives kind of drip away, fall by the wayside a bit more easily, just as a result of that.
Wow, that's really awesome. So how long have you been practicing this?
Oh, crikey, there's a question. Over 10 years now. I've been, about a decade. I've been interested in positive psychology, practicing it, researching it, having a go at it, obviously living my own life by its principles because I like to be able to practice what I preach. So, about 10 years.
And how did you get into this industry?
Well, as a clinical psychologist, when you're training, you do your 3-year doctorate course and you do all kinds of different psychological models within that because you need to be able to have a go at all of them, I guess, and make sure you specialise in the ones that suit yourself, but also that you're hopefully really quite good at and can help people, because that's the point, isn't it, to help other people through this. So positive psychology just hit me right between the eyes as something that I was so passionate about instantly. It was the one model that just made me feel like I was home almost. And whilst the others, I see the benefit in them, no doubt. I just thought that for me, positive psychology was the one to go for.
I'm assuming you started to study specific subjects before you went to university?
Yeah, wow. Okay, well, I will nutshell this one, Sanj, because...
Well, take your time.
Oh, bless you. Okay, well, it takes a lot of years is the answer to that. And it's a dedication, really. What I would say to anybody who might be thinking about it is, if you're really passionate about it and you really want to do it, go for it. But if you're thinking, plan A, plan B, if there's a plan B, I'm not. You've got to be really focused and want to do it and determined, because it's not an easy route. But at least for me, anyway, I don't think of myself as the most academic person in the world. When I was at school, I kind of did okay, but we didn't have psychology as an option until I went to college. And I went to this open evening, and there's a teacher there, a psychology lecturer, and she absolutely bowled me over with what she was talking about. I was fascinated. Wow. So I remember going home to my parents and saying, I want to take psychology A-level. And my parents, being as lovely as they are, completely accepting of this completely new and wild and wonderful topic. And then I did psychology A-level alongside a couple of other things, obviously. And then I did psychology at degree level, so undergraduate degree.
Where was that?
That was at Keele University in Staffordshire, which is where I'm from.
Right. I can hear the accent.
Things don't change. Which is where I have to start calling you Duck, and then people, anybody listening that might be further up towards Staffordshire will know exactly what I mean by that. and then endearment, I promise.
Yeah.
So then I went to do my 3-year undergraduate degree in psychology. And during that time, I was doing some volunteer work on a mental health ward at the hospital up there. And I found it really fascinating to work with people with mental health difficulties. And I just wanted to help people. It's all I wanted to do in life. So I decided I wanted to be some kind of psychologist. I wasn't quite sure what. But when I left uni, I wanted to get some experience. So I actually became a psychology lecturer for a while. So I taught A-level and AS level psychology.
Wow.
And I had a really great mentor there who I think probably wanted me to stay on in the lecturing world, but I had this dream to become a psychologist and help people with difficulties. So I embarked on this career of clinical psychology, which starts with at least a good couple of years of being an assistant psychologist. So I moved around the country a little bit just to get lots of experience as an assistant to other clinical psychologists to make sure you know what you're in for, basically.
Yeah.
Make sure you enjoy the work. And that was a really great experience. And then I did a Neuropsychology Masters at Oxford Brookes University.
Right.
Because there's an expectation and a requirement, really, because it's quite competitive to get into clinical psychology. Most people have done, some kind of postgraduate. Even some people have done PhDs before they go on to do the doctorate, which I hats off to them. I did a master's and that was enough for me. But the Neuropsychology Masters was fascinating. I learned a lot about the brain, and I do get a bit geeky about the brain sometimes when I'm working with people. So I do draw on that, learning a lot. And then I became a trainee clinical psychologist and embarked on the 3-year doctorate at Exeter University, which is where I am now. And that was so I started that about over 10 years ago now. I've been qualified for a good decade. And that was the clinical psychology course that turned me into a fully fledged clinical psychologist finally, after 3 years.
Amazing.
Dedicating my life.
So with regards to that dedication of your life, how much time did that take?
About 9 years.
Wow, that's interesting. And you touched on you working as an assistant in a mental health hospital, is that right? Did you say?
Yes.
What was that experience like? Because there's lots of people that go into academia, they're given a academic view of what this world is like. My assumption, and I could be wrong here, when you started to work with patients or be exposed to patients, what was that experience like for you mentally? It
was different in different settings. So I had a few roles whereby I was exposed to working with, whether inpatients or outpatients, and with varying mental health difficulties across the lifespan. So I had different experiences, if I'm honest. I worked in a children's hospital for a while, which was absolutely amazing. I mean, to be able to work with children, to bring them to a better place, to work on real kind of debilitating phobias with them or some kind of health difficulty was just so rewarding.
Wow.
And then to work with their parents as well, and just to see how it impacts a whole family or a whole community or system around a child, because obviously a lot of people are working with the child in services like that was quite an eye-opening experience. But then similarly, I worked in an inpatient unit with women with borderline personality disorder. Now it was quite distressing for the patients. Obviously, this is quite an intense condition or diagnosis. And that was, again, just eye-opening in a different way. I found it fascinating, and all I wanted to do was help people to feel their best. But they had the most immense struggles in their lives. And, sometimes that was really difficult because I would walk away from these, the clinic or the hospital setting and be able to go home and live my own life away from that. And to know that they were still there and I was leaving them and, they had this kind of constant cycle of distress was something that I'd not quite experienced before.
Right.
But I absolutely loved the way that both of those settings worked. They had a really nice ethos around them. They, the last one, the borderline personality disorder unit, they used something called dialectical behaviour therapy, which is a specific model around tolerating immense distress and focusing on being in the moment and mindfulness, and emotional regulation and working on your relationships. And I learned so much about myself as well as being able to learn about them and help them. So it was quite an intense experience, really. But yeah, definitely reflecting back is quite nice. I don't often get the opportunity to do that. Thank you very much.
No way. I mean, this is why I love doing these talks, is because people come back to me and they're like, it's the first time they've kind of exposed some of these memories in a discussion format sometimes. And it can be quite fulfilling. You mentioned that you found some of these experiences challenging. How did you deal with being exposed to how some people are in these traumas when you left them? Did you have to switch off when you went home, or was there a way you had to learn how to compute this trauma that you were being exposed to so that you could do your job?
No, I think, well, to start with, it's a good thing because you have to be exposed to this stuff as an assistant, because if there's something about you that then realizes, actually, this isn't the work for me, this isn't the career for me, then that's great, because you've realized that before you embark on, the doctorate or any other kind of training. So it's absolutely right to be able to go through that process. I think the other thing is you're really heavily supervised, so which is fantastic. You're really well supported in these roles.
Amazing.
So, there's no concern really around that. But at the same time, I think it depends on your own personality type, maybe, or how you, I don't know, cope with difficulties or stress or anything really, like anybody else in any other job. Do you switch off when you close the door at the office, or do you take it home with you? I don't think it's any different. It might be slightly different in terms of the content and the context, but whether you can switch off or not is probably down to your personality type. And I will admit that I felt like I pretty quickly became quite good at separating my work and personal life, because that was really important to me. So there have been times when those have kind of bled into each other a bit, and that's when I know that I start to struggle a little bit, because I like to I just like to have fun, Sanj, in my own time. I like to be able to switch off. I like to be with family and friends. I have a lot of hobbies. I like to have some nice quiet time at home, and I like to be, when I'm at work, I want to be 100% focused, completely engaged, because I work with people. And I want people to be their best. I want to be my best for them. And I can't be my best for them if I don't have those times where I switch off.
Absolutely.
So things like holidays, I don't, anybody that works with me, it might be frustrating for them, but they know that I don't answer a text or a call if I've switched off for the day. If it's in the evening or weekend, that's not my working time. What that does mean is when I'm back to work, I'm completely engaged and I'm not doing other things. So you've got 100% of my attention, and that works for me, but it's not for everybody. But that's how I kind of manage it, really. And I think that's really important when you're working with people in distress, because you've got to be your best self in order to offer your best for them. That's what they need as well as yourself, I think.
Absolutely. It's not easy. I guess it's natural for it to be a challenge in any kind of work circle where you're working with people, because you have a responsibility to them. With regards to your assistant work, was that with private companies or was that with the NHS?
Yeah, one of each, actually. So I worked in the NHS in a children's hospital, and then the borderline personality disorder clinic ward was a private hospital.
You ended up working for the NHS for a while as a qualified clinical psychologist?
I did, yeah. I was in the NHS as a trainee and an assistant and a qualified clinical psychologist for over 10 years.
Wow. So what was that experience like?
It was great. I mean, the NHS is a wonderful organisation, isn't it? We know now more than ever it does fantastic things, and the camaraderie with teams was absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed working with all of the managers I worked with in the NHS. I think there's something about the ethos there that you're all in it together, and there was a genuine drive to help people. That people who work, in my experience, obviously, I'm generalising, but I found that people that I worked with in the NHS genuinely just wanted to help people, sometimes at their own detriment, because there's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, there's a lot to do, a lot of people to work for and with, and sometimes, we need to be able to step back and look after ourselves as well. But yeah, really, really nice experience on the whole.
And then you ended up working with Sir Richard Branson. I remember looking at your website and seeing there was a picture of you sitting next to him having a chat. Tell us about that experience and what it was like.
My word, it's got to be one of the highlights of my career, right? I'm not sure that it gets much better than meeting somebody so famous and influential in such an amazing setting. I was very, very fortunate to go over to the British Virgin Islands to work with Richard Branson and his workforce, but also communities out there, which was amazing. So yeah, I met Richard a few times. He was very kind to me, and he invited me on various social outings, and mainly things like hiking and cycling and boating and things like that. But he was great. He chatted to me as he would chat to anyone else. He was asking about my life and my family. He was really interested in the work that I was doing, and very grateful for me being out there helping his team and his staff on Necker Island and Mosquito Island and Virgin Gorda, I lived out there for a month, which was amazing.
Talk to us about the context of you working out there and helping them with their well-being.
I was asked by my manager whether I was interested in an opportunity to go and help some mental health aid following Hurricane Irma, which was a huge hurricane that devastated parts of the British Virgin Islands and completely changed people's lives out there. So there was a call to go and help the hurricane survivors over there, in a culture which had very limited services where they were at the time, but very much needed, particularly following such a traumatic disaster. So I obviously raised my hand as quickly as I could, and very fortunately was chosen to go out there. So I lived out there for a month in the community, and worked with the community as well as other health professionals in trying to, pave the way for an improved mental health provision, which that there wasn't really. There was some on the main island of Tortola, but on the smaller islands where I was, there was very little there at the time. So I worked with Virgin Limited Edition, which is the Virgin company that's out there, which is doing fantastic work. There are some people in that team who absolutely bowled me over with their passion for wanting to look after their staff and the communities, because it's an interesting place. It's paradise, but it's also it's hard work out there. The locals and the residents they work very hard. They're such good people, from root to tip. Just it shines out of them, and they deserve the very best in mental health support. So I went out there and I did some individual therapy, but I also did a lot of group resilience work and some fun group things as well to get people in the positive psychology frame of mind. A lot of workshops around healthy mindset, and some work on kind of personality styles and strength awareness training and things like that. I thought that I was going to go out there and work on hurricane disaster. So I did a lot of research about hurricanes and natural disasters and post-traumatic stress. And I had this huge folder of information that I took on the plane. It probably was half of the weight of my suitcase. And then I got out there and I quickly realized that these people, whilst they've been through this devastating, impactful event, they're just, they're humans going through the same stuff as everybody else. They wanted to talk about life events. They wanted to talk about families and relationships and home life and work life and stress, as well as the hurricane, obviously. But I was so humbled by them and their resolve and resilience after what they've been through. And they just opened their arms to me completely and just welcomed me as somebody that I think they really needed somebody to just be in that space for them, that safe therapeutic space. But also their willingness to just go there when they hadn't had that before was phenomenal. And I thank them. I think they probably did more for me than I could have possibly done for them, in terms of what I learned about the culture and people and how to just be your best was just incredible.
That's amazing. And you touched on you having sidestep. So you prepped for this experience, this mission that you were on, and you had to kind of sidestep in a different direction. Do you have to do that a lot as a clinical psychologist?
All the time. I often feel like I feel like I should be the expert in what I know and what I'm doing, but I often feel like I'm not, because you never know what somebody's going to bring, right? I don't know the questions that you're going to ask me today, Sanj. So I feel like, okay, I'm going to record a podcast and I've kind of got an idea of what you do and what you talk about. So I might make some assumptions about what you might ask me and the things I might be talking about. But in the end, you ask me a question because your interest goes elsewhere, or our conversation goes down another avenue. And I love that about humans. You just never know what you're going to get. And I think there's something about just being really open-minded and flexible to it and accepting of whatever comes in, but also just hopefully the basic skills that I have will always be helpful. But yeah, I'm always sidestepping to whatever comes up. And I really love that about my role, because no two conversations are the same, let alone no 2 days.
You touched on some of the challenges that you faced when you were out there. As a mental and wellbeing practitioner, what are the challenges within your industry at the moment?
People not being able to be around people during this current time,
right?
Other than this pandemic, that's probably the biggest challenge. And obviously people knowing what to do next, because something huge has happened to us all that's kind of blindsided everybody. And we all went into this flurry of learning how to do things digitally or be virtual or online. And we've all learned a lot. But at the same time, I think that, we haven't really stopped for very long to just reflect. And I think at some point when this is all hopefully over, we'll look back and reflect, and that'll be a really, really poignant time, like what actually did happen and what we went through and how we grew, developed and fell apart all at the same time. We've gone through a myriad of emotions, and I think that's okay to admit that. I don't think anybody's gone through this time completely plain sailing. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from this, but I'm not sure that we're in a place yet where we're fully reflecting on what's actually been going on from a mental health point of view anyway.
I noticed on your Instagram, there was a quote that said, "It's okay not to be okay."
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed recently, a lot of my friends actually, I kind of pride myself on having a circle of people around me that are usually quite positive and open about things. But recently, some of my friends have started to talk about some of the mental issues they're having to deal with now, particularly because of this lockdown world that we're in at the moment. And you touched on something very important there that I think everyone needs, is to be around people, to talk about these things and to listen and to support each other. Have you seen a change? I mean, lockdown in the United Kingdom started around March time, and we've come out and we've gone back into it. With regards to your industry, have you seen discussions being highlighted about how we're going to deal with this PTSD that's starting to build up and bubble?
People are more open to talking about mental health, I think. I think we've all, I can't say all of us, I think a lot of people are realising that nobody's immune to mental health difficulties. And I don't mean that we're all going to have a diagnosis in our lives. I don't mean that. But what I mean is everybody has a mind. Therefore, everybody has mental health. Whether it's good or bad depends on what's going on. It depends on how you've woken up that day. It depends on how you're feeling, your mood, your health, lots of reasons. Nobody's immune to mental health having a little bit of a dip from time to time. And then that dip can turn into chronic mental health difficulty. It can turn into a diagnosis. But I think that more people are realizing that, actually, my mental health can suffer. I thought I was really resilient. I thought nothing would ever, happen to me. But actually, this pandemic has taught people that something can happen to you, and it can come from nowhere, and it can affect your mindset as well as other things in your life. And that doesn't mean that we've all got problems all of a sudden. What it means is we were all opening our eyes, which is an amazing thing. It's what we needed to do. Because I think there's been a lot of stigma around mental health for a long time, as you'll know.
Yeah.
And even though we're starting to have these conversations about mental health, what I'm pushing towards is always, okay, what do we do about it? Let's be proactive. Let's not wait for mental health crises to emerge, because that's my concern, that if we don't do what we need to do now in terms of our mental well-being, then following this global health crisis of COVID-19, we're going to end up with a global mental health crisis on our hands. And I don't want that to happen. So most of the people I work with are all on board with that. And we're saying, right, what can we do then for ourselves and all of our people? So let's filter this through to as many people as we possibly can. And let's be proactive. Let's put some preventative measures in place. And that's what positive psychology is all about. And that's what positive well-being is all about, right? So I think people are waking up to that. And I'm seeing more people in authoritative or influential positions talk more openly about their struggles, because they're realizing that not only everybody has this, but also people really appreciate hearing about it, because nobody's going to look at you and say, what, stress? What are you talking about? You're feeling a bit down because you couldn't see all your family and friends for a few months? I don't understand. Nobody's going to say that. Yeah. People are going to say, yes, I get it. Oh, thank God that somebody else feels the same as me. Can we talk about this? Can we share it? Can we all be in this together? We like to find our herd, don't we? We're animals, essentially. We like people to understand us. We like to find similarities in what we're going through. And that's how we bond. That's how we feel better. That's how we get through things. Problem shared, all those lovely cliches are cliches for a reason. So I do think that all of this human, conversational, open-minded, it's all happening. It's all around mental health, which is good. We've got a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but at least we're getting there.
You touched on the neuroplasticity of the mind and how it can change. And when something happens, your mind can morph into something that you were not prepared for. And you do have to look after your mind and nurture it and support it and listen to it and open it up for discussion sometimes.
Yeah, you have to look after your mind just as much as you have to look after your body. So if you were to run a marathon, you would probably allow your body to have some rest time after that marathon, right? So if you go through a particularly stressful time, then we need to give our minds a break after that, whether it's mindfulness or having some time off work or getting some good sleep or switching off with a good book or a TV program or whatever it might be. We have to look after our mind as well as our bodies, but we don't seem to be in that habit just yet. But that's part of what I do, is try to get people into some small, really simple but daily effective habits so that they can make sure that they're really looking after their mental as well as physical well-being. You're absolutely right.
It's beautiful. Just touching back on the industry that you're working in, you focused on some of the challenges. Are you faced with provocation with regards to some of the ideas that you bring to market?
Sometimes, but I think that's okay. I mean, can't please all the people all the time. But one of the biggest things that comes into my mind is that a lot of people just don't like this happiness idea,
Right.
Which is quite interesting.
That is interesting.
I don't think it's that they don't like the idea of happiness or want to be happy. I think some people, it jars with them to focus on happiness because they think that, or maybe make an assumption that it's going to be about pushing down anything negative that happens or not giving other emotions a voice. And it's not about that at all. Like I said at the beginning, it's very much about bringing all of the emotions into play and letting all of our emotions, whether you want to label them as good, bad or ugly, bringing them all in to have their place on the stage. But there's got to be something that we're aiming for. And for me, I think that it's a basic human desire to want to be happy. So for me, happiness as a focus is beautiful, and it's not an end goal. It's something that we can create now if we want to. It's quite easy to elicit some happy hormones. I do that a lot for people. It's quite easy to do, but we need to practice it, make it habitual, and almost accept that happiness is something that we can aspire to and bring into our lives. But so I do. Not very often, but I do regularly enough get people who say, actually, focusing on happiness is I don't know whether it's trite or what their words might be, but there's this thing called cherophobia, which is the fear of happiness.
Really?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I think what it is so one of my most she's one of my heroes in terms of, she's a researcher, she's called Brené Brown, and I look up to her so much. She's a real inspiration of mine. And she talks about this thing called foreboding joy. And she gives the analogy of if you're watching a film and there's a family in a car having a wonderful time and they're all happy and joyous and they're winding their way through the hills, and it's a sunny day and there's music playing and they're all laughing and joking, what happens next? And of course, the foreboding joy element of you and this cherophobia, fear of happiness, is, well, if you're too happy, then there's got to be something gloomy and dangerous lurking around the corner, because that's just life. So I think cherophobia and a fear of happiness is partly something to do with that. And the British culture is, I don't know, there's lots of you might be able to remind me of some, but that can't bring them to mind now. But there are lots of things that we say, plan for the not plan for the worst, expect the best, because that wouldn't be one. But do you know what I mean? Like, not focusing on the best, because then you won't be disappointed if the worst happens. And it's we have this society, or this notion that if we focus on too much of the good stuff, or if we try to be too happy, then we're just going to fail and be disappointed.
Yeah.
But I don't see it like that. I think that the more you can focus on happiness and positivity and optimism, and the more hopeful you can be, then that's the way you're living your life in that moment. So surely the more you can do that, then across the spectrum of your life, it's going to feel better for you, right? The more magical moments of positive emotions you can have, the better your life is going to be. I mean, that's a very, very low level kind of view of it, but does that make sense?
Oh, totally. I love that. Just from doing a lot of live performance, and I do stand-up comedy, some of the clients I have that want to gain the confidence to be on stage, the first thing they worry about is, but what if I look bad? That's the first challenge I have to overcome with them, is get them to think, well, actually, don't worry about if you're going to look bad, because you haven't looked bad yet. So just get up there and go in there with a smile on your face and enjoy the experience and see where it leads you. And if you do make mistakes, that's fine. Learn from them. Don't let that mistake ruin your day. So I totally get what you're saying.
I think that's it as well. There's something about people who don't want to be seen as a failure. They don't like to be made a fool of, or seen to be seen as a fool, or don't like to get things wrong. We don't like to, we don't like to make a fool of ourselves or seem a bit silly. But actually, we're all humans. Like we're all a little bit silly. We're all successful and failures at times. We all do things that we regret. We all do things that we are glad we did. We all experience shame. We all experience complete joy and all of those things. And I think there's something about, why do we try to shy away from some of these emotions? I'm not quite sure why that happens. I think it's something to do with, society and the way that we're brought up, and, the media and expectations. But if we just accept everything as is and as it comes up, I think we'd all be a little bit easier on ourselves and each other.
Absolutely. There's a sentence you said there, which I think you have to coin. You probably have coined it. You elicit happy hormones. I mean, that's gold dust, isn't it? You say that to anyone, they're like, right, okay, where's my checkbook? Here we go. I want you to elicit those for me. That's brilliant.
I must add that to my website offering then.
It's powerful. It's really powerful.
Well, I mean, you do. I don't mean I can help you to see how you can do that for yourself. This is the thing, we can all do it for ourselves. This is the wonderful thing. But my idea is, this sounds a bit strange, Sanj, but my idea is to get these ideas out there as much as possible so that nobody needs me anymore, right? Because we're all able to do this for ourselves. That's the golden the golden.
It doesn't sound crazy. It's awesome. I'm getting a lot of joy from this conversation, so so it's working. Brilliant.
There you go.
You've talked about how you got into the industry. You've talked about your experiences in the industry. Where are you now as Dr. Vikki Barnes? Where are you, and where do you see your future?
Well, where I'm at now, I founded Positive Wellbeing, which is my business, in April 2019. So I'm still learning with that, really. It's the first time I've run a business, and it's full time. So I went from full-time employment to full-time self-employment.
Wow.
So a year and a half in, obviously, I have to be honest, I'm still learning, really. But I've been very lucky that I've had enough people alongside me understanding or believing, whatever the word is, that what I do is important enough to, work with me. So that's been really great. But I suppose I'm still growing my business is what I'm doing.
Yep.
I'm flying the flag for positive mental health strategies and preventative mental health strategies for, it's more for those, I guess, forward-thinking organizations, really, because, understandably, different people, different organizations, they're in different situations, and we just have to try and get this into as many places as we can.
Yeah.
The future, I've worked a little bit overseas, as we've touched on with the BVI work.
Yep.
And I'd like to do more global work. I think it's really exciting to feel that, we've as a world, we are doing similar things for our mental well-being. And I think that personally, positive psychology is a really nice, accessible tool for anybody and everybody, no matter what your life circumstance. It's not rocket science. You don't need to spend a lot of money on it. You don't have to have any, particular equipment. It's just something that we can learn, and we can teach each other and take into, any corner of the world, which I find absolutely exciting as anything. And one of my biggest passions, I suppose, and what I'd like to bring into the future. So if there's anybody listening that has any ideas about this, because this is something that I'd love to do. My two passions are well-being of people, which I do, and well-being of the planet. So I would love to bring those two together somehow. Like, I love being outdoors with nature and wildlife. I love, the fact that we're more attuned to conservation and recycling and looking after our world, being sustainable and things like that. I don't get it all right all of the time, obviously, but I try to do my bit. But I'd love to bring the work that I do into that well-being of the planet space as well. So I'm trying to think of some ideas moving forward. That would be my future. That's a bit of a longer term goal. What I'm doing at the moment is with a really amazing colleague of mine, running some wellbeing retreats, which is starting to bring those two things together. So we spend a lot of time outdoors. We really engage with nature and trying to bring nature-based therapy into what I do, and thinking about the environment and our communities and how we can do good things for our environments. And then that makes us feel good, because this is all about the greater good. We're not individuals in this world. We are a collective. And I really want to make more of that.
Absolutely. I think that the work that you do is the starting point into how we rewire the culture of what we are as human beings.
Yeah.
It's been changing for a while, but we're on that cusp of a revolution for many reasons. One, because we're in a pandemic. Two, there's always been a capitalist focus when people think about bettering themselves, and that mindset is starting to change. And also, the world is dying, and we have to change as human beings to save this planet. And when I say the world is dying, I mean from a nature perspective. Yeah,
I absolutely agree.
Vikki, this has been incredible. I'm so buzzing. I just know I'm going to have a great day after this. Is brilliant.
Wonderful. I'm so pleased.
We're just coming to the end. We've got just a couple of questions I just want to ask you, if we can squeeze them in. First one, what advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your professional career?
Wow. I've been asked this question before, and this is a question that I ask others, and I can never think in the moment of what I've said in the past. So I always just go with my gut instinct in the moment. It's such a powerful question. What would I say to myself at the beginning of my career? For me, it's all about authenticity. And if you are true to yourself and really go with what you're passionate about and what you're, really driven to do, whatever that might be, then you can't go far wrong, I don't think. It might be hard. It might be a struggle. You might question yourself at times, and I have, believe me. But as long as you remain true to yourself and what you do is genuine, I think I've come to that realization over the past few years, but I think at the beginning of my career, I probably didn't realize that. There's times when you try to fit in and you try to squeeze into a mold, and there's a gut instinct there that we don't quite feel comfortable and you're not sure why. And there's something about, getting a bit older and realizing that, but there's also something about giving yourself permission right from the start. And I think that's probably what I would say to myself, I think, if I was going back to 18-year-old me, or whatever it might be.
Wise words, very important words. Dr. Vikki Barnes, again, you've been amazing. There's going to be loads of people, I'm sure there's going to be loads of people listening to this that will want to get in contact with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
I am on social media. So if you're on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, it's at Dr. Vikki Barnes, or I have a website, which is www.drvikkibarnes.com, and that has my email address, and you can contact me through that. Lots more information about what I do as well on there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Vikki. Those of you listening, thanks so much for your time. Again, please share, subscribe. The hashtag for these Tiger Heart Chats is Tiger Heart Chats, all one word. Whatever you're doing, I hope you're safe. Most importantly, be good.